It's a great privilege to have been invited to present in this format, despite the disappointment of being unable to come to Helsinki with my colleagues to do so. Our topic is all the more vital at this time of the COVID pandemic, due to the dismissal in the media and by some politicians around the world of the act of singing as dangerous and unwelcome activity. Certainly, we need to work closely with our colleagues in medicine and engineering to assure ourselves of the conditions in which singers and instrumentalists may rehearse and perform safely, especially the children for whom this should play a significant part in their early education. The potential damage to the health of human beings, young and old, in being deprived of the opportunity to sing is of greater significance than many realize. In addressing the conference themes of unity and diversity, our presentation seeks to explore current understanding of one of the foundational features of musical practice and its transmission, the relationship between the universal musical capacities conferred anatomically and neurally by evolution and the attributes of local culture that shape specific vocal styles. Informed by research in acoustics, audiology, ethnomusicology, and pedagogy, it revisits one of the classic themes in philosophy, the roles of nature and nurture in human development. Two contributions will be presented in sequence, leading to a concluding statement. I will commence with an overview of the topic and also represent the contribution made in collaboration with Irina Spalitska that considers the cultural manifestations of tonal practice and perception. Then Joshua Bamford will report on the experience of singing together music from different cultures in a choir open to achieving varieties of style and presentation in different languages. During the last 30 years, Charles Darwin's speculation on musical vocalization as the foundation of language has received renewed attention in a variety of disciplines, including ethnomusicology, psychology, archaeology, and neurology. Two features of musical practice represent a significant focus of new research: the nature of the difference of range between the voices of women and children and men, and the nature of pitch organization that links tonality and vocal range to language and style. New technology has provided detailed evidence for the mechanism and development of the voice, differentiating between the anatomy of children, women, and men, and illustrating change over the life cycle. Diverse vocal practice has been analysed from both productive and cultural viewpoints. Theorization of the relationship between varieties of tuning practice and their origin in response to the Harmonic Series was proposed by Rudolf Steiner, and the implications of these perspectives for music education require attention. Let's take a look at our anatomy from an evolutionary perspective. The last 8 million years since we shared an ancestor with our nearest genetic relative, the chimpanzee, have seen a considerable divergence between them and us, and this journey is partly traceable in the fossil record of intermediate species. We have become a fully upright biped and lost most of our body hair. Our teeth have become smaller in relation to our size, and our brains considerably larger. Our upper respiratory tracts have attained a unique structure that permits sophisticated voluntary control over breathing and has made space for a flexible tongue that can vary the timbre of our phonation as well as articulating consonants. In each language, a range of vowel sounds represents a variety of responses to specific oral postures. Their sound mirrors the facial expressions that gave rise to them. Ooh, soothing. Ah, pleasant surprise or satisfaction. E, concern, or fear. Here we see the 15 or so distinct vowels required in my native tongue, each of which can modify the sound and meaning of a word. I recommend you try making a list similarly in your own language and consider the musical consequences that we will explore in a moment. When I say these words, you hear meaning and probably picture the object or idea that is referred to. Boot, boat, bought, bot, art, bat, bet, bait, bit, beat. I've got boot again because I'd like to add the Scottish bit. When I sing these, your experience may be slightly different, though not entirely. Boot, boat, bought, bot, bat, bat, bet, bait, bit, beat. Suppose now I leave out the consonants, the b and t sounds that begin and end the words, and perform the vowels as a continuous variation on a sustained pitch. So I'll start at the top and move down the list. Ask yourself, do you now hear these as language or perhaps as music? Oh, the basis of this phenomenon is the harmonic series, the logarithmic set of resonances predicted by the laws of physics that occur where two linear systems of sound production or response interact. Linear in the sense that my voice can go ah, dependent on the vibrations in my vocal folds, and linear in the sense that the resonator can change its capacity to interact. When those two interact with one another, they fall into a logarithmic relationship that gives rise to the series that is written here in music notation. These are the very sounds that one hears from the 3rd month in the womb onwards, which confer the universal capacity that we carry in our genes for participation in music and for acquiring the capacity for language. Now you can transpose this range of pitches to suit your voice. I'm going to do it a wee bit higher than it's written here. And so on. I'm a bit unpracticed at the moment. So that's the scientific overview for the phenomenon that we are exploring today. It explains why infants can learn language from both their fathers and their mothers, why boys undergo voice change in adolescence, whereby they end up performing as adults an octave lower than they did as children, and why we can all sing together both in unison and in harmony. I'll now present some examples from different cultural manifestations of group singing on which I've been working with Erima Spalitska. So first of all, we're going to hear some sutatinės from Lithuania. Here, girls are flirting with singing dissonantly, but you can only do that confidently and with the beauty of sound that we hear because you have an instinctive understanding for the harmony of tuning. In the clip that follows, we hear mixed voice singing from southern Lithuania. Here, on the whole, the men are singing quite high in their voices to make chords with women who are singing in the lower part of their range. The Mugam example here of the male voice from Azerbaijan hears him singing with great intensity, high in what we would think of perhaps as the tenor register.
Features a male or female singer, accompanied by musicians playing traditional instruments, especially the tar, a long-necked 11-string lute, the kamancha, a 4-string spike fiddle, and the daf, a sort of large tambourine.
The really interesting thing is that when female voices sing Mugam, they do so at almost exactly the same range as men. That intensity can only be achieved by women's voices in singing at that pitch level. To go up an octave would be to scream or to sound like a coloratura soprano, which would not be consistent with this style.
Considered to be the classical music of Azerbaijan, Mugam draws upon melodies, rhythms and performance techniques of popular and bard origin, and can be heard in a wide range of settings throughout the country.
In the case of alpine yodeling, the same similarity occurs as it does in Mugam. For male voices to have the register break between their chest and falsetto can only be replicated in women's voices between chest and head voice, which is almost at the same range as the men. So I'm now going to hand over to Joshua Bamford. Josh has been looking at this phenomenon from the perspective of choral singers and their sharing of different experiences and performing the music of each other's culture.
Right, thank you, Nick. So when we started discussing the concept for this symposium, it got me thinking and sort of reflecting on an experience I had just a couple of years ago, working with an international choir while I was stationed in Finland, and reflecting upon this kind of tension between blending in and standing out. And we'll discuss what I mean by that, but I'll start by talking about what I'm doing now in my current research, which is looking at the synchrony bonding effect. And this is an effect that's sort of received quite some attention in the literature in recent years. It seems to carry across all kinds of synchronized human behaviors. So music and dance being a prime example, but it's also been looked at in sporting contexts or in marches, or indeed there's been experiments done with very simple kind of finger tapping. And what people have suggested is that the act of synchronizing with others seems to be a very efficient mechanism for social bonding. Efficient in that it is parallel and you can do it with many other people at once, and distributed in that you can sort of be at a distance to each other. So that's useful when you're social distancing. And this seems to tap into a endorphin reward system, and it's thought that we get this spike of endorphins when we're coordinating our movements with other people, and this feels rewarding, and we associate that positive feeling with the others in the group, leading ultimately to a sense of kind of identity fusion or self-other overlap with the rest of the group. And this is all, it's a very interesting kind of area of research and very much what I've been immersed in recently. But it's important to note that people don't actually always do the same thing at the same time. We sing in harmony as much, if not more, than we sing in unison, as Nick has been just discussing. And so this kind of brings me to the choir that I was helping to direct a couple of years ago. It's now been running for 9 years. I was the second conductor that it had, and it goes through conductors quite often because it's a student-led and very much a peer-led group. There is a conductor who acts as a facilitator in the process, helping people to kind of collect songs and to teach and learn the songs. But all the repertoire is suggested by members of the choir who have come from all over the world. Most of them are international students or in some way affiliated with the university. And they all suggest songs, mostly folk songs from their home country, usually in a language other than English, although occasionally we would do songs in English as well. Indeed, there were a number of songs we would do in Finnish, but everything from Swedish to Russian to Hebrew to Hindi to Afrikaans, and the list goes on. As whatever we had represented in the group. It was very much a non-judgmental space, and we required no prior experience. Ultimately, it was an opportunity for people to share their language and culture. And it's very much still going. We're actually transitioning to an online format shortly. But it provided this platform for people to discuss both their similarities and their differences. And there's some theory kind of behind the concept of a choir like this that is intended to share culture. There's good research suggesting that having positive, close contact with others is better than a kind of superficial contact, than just kind of seeing people from other groups around. Having close contact with members of a kind of different cultural group to yourself does wonders towards generating positive feelings towards that culture and towards understanding it. And there are many other examples of arts being used as a way of community development. The key being that it's often project focused and intrinsically motivated. So people are involved in the artistic project on its own merits and taking part in this through a creative process, rather than it being kind of forced externally to bring people together. There are challenges, of course, in the approach that we've had. Just agreeing on terminology and our expectations of the choir have at times been challenging. Terminology in terms of our language around music theory. Of course, a number of the songs that we tried to perform together were not in Western diatonic scales, although many of them would have had a harmonic series sort of underpinning to them, or in some kind of pentatonic scale perhaps, but we had modes from the Middle East that did not fit Western notation. So my attempts to kind of notate some of the music that people brought to me were certainly challenging. And indeed, we would resort to just oral teaching for much of our work. But what it did provide is an opportunity to kind of understand each other through participation. And in a way, I think of the sort of anthropological approach of a participant observer doing an ethnography. And we all kind of were ethnographers in this, in that we experience each other's cultures through learning the songs of that culture and learning to try and pronounce the language of that culture. And this provided a springboard for people to talk about the ways in which their cultures were similar or different. So this kind of leads me to a sort of, in my thinking, it kind of generates a process we can talk about that we have both when talking about harmony and also cultural diversity. Harmony thus kind of providing a wonderful metaphor for cultural diversity in this sense. So, to get a choir or indeed a kind of mixed community to work, you need to base it on a shared foundation. Quite often this is a shared sense of a tempo. And in fact, that basic level synchrony that I started talking about provides a structure for which everyone can kind of reach a common ground, or having shared intentions about what you want to get out of the music or the interaction. But each person involved brings their own to it. So you often have different voice types, which may be rooted in differences between men and women's voices, or perhaps these are eliminated for the sake of reaching a common ground, as we saw in some of the video examples that Nick presented earlier. People also bring different skills and different prior knowledge, their own cultural knowledge or of their language that they can share. Each contributes to the whole. And that whole is ultimately far greater than the sum of its parts. And a choir is sort of more than just the individual lines involved. A piece in 4 parts is a thing in and of itself, beyond just what each individual part provides. Just as a community is more than the individual people involved, and ultimately leads to the sense of a creation of a new identity. So through this process of tension between total synchrony and non-synchrony, or between kind of blending in and standing out.
Well, thanks very much, Josh. We've heard some very interesting examples of various kinds of music, and we've thought about the ways in which culture transmits perhaps the specific repertoires that each individual is part of within their community. But underlying that is the fact that everybody has some kind of capacity for rhythmic engagement, language, and pitched singing. So we now conclude our exploration of the features of anatomical inheritance and cultural transmission that are the foundations of our capacity to sing together. Our singing is universal through all communities, while diverse in character and context. But we are a singing species, and this special capacity defines who we are.